All right, you want to get started?
Let's do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 5th episode, I believe, of the Travel Photography Podcast. In this episode, we have Mads Peter Iversen from Denmark as a special guest, and myself, Greg Snell, hosting the podcast. And we're just kind of winging it here. This is the first one that I've done via Google Meets. So let's see how it goes. Mads, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you. Like one week out, I'm on a vacation for once.
Right on. Yeah, we're just past the summer solstice here in Northern Europe. For those who don't know, Mads and I actually live quite close to one another. You're in Copenhagen, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm in Hamburg. So for us right now, the sun sets at like 10:15 p.m.
Something like that about there, yeah.
And you're on your summer vacation? What's that look like?
So I'm actually expecting to, me and Sophie just jumping in the car and then driving south. And once we get to Hamburg, we're probably going to roll the dice whether we're going further south or if we're going maybe west. But we haven't actually decided yet. It's how we like to travel.
Oh, sweet. I had no idea. Well, let me know when you're coming through because our second baby is about to be born and I'm not going anywhere until the end of August. So I will likely be here. And for those who don't know, Mads and I have met up for a photography trip in Denmark this time last year, which is kind of crazy how fast a year can just blink on by.
No, they just evaporate these.
Yeah. So you have kids. Anyway, All right. So let's talk about travel photography. Yes. Obviously, I think everybody watching this knows who you are. But if you get a chance maybe to introduce yourself, just let us know, in your opinion, who is Mads Peter Iversen?
It takes so long by now. So Danish landscape photographer. I photograph both in Denmark and outside of Denmark. I've been photographing quite a lot in Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Italy. I've been to both Antarctica and the Arctic, Svalbard, Greenland. And then I just photograph a whole lot in Denmark when I'm back home here, in between trips. So yeah, that's the very fast version.
Yeah, it's very impressive. I've told you this in person, like the amount of good quality photos that you get from your own backyard in Denmark. I think a lot of people sometimes find it hard to inspire themselves to photograph in their own backyard, me included, and I live in Hamburg. You know, I have explored a lot of the city, but I kind of still find it tough to get out and pick up the camera and go. That's very cool. I remember first like hearing about you because of some of the Iceland stuff. I remember you were really putting Iceland on the map on YouTube and you know Iceland really, really well. I guess to get started, what I'm interested in is like, how did you decide to start traveling to Iceland and the Faroe Islands to focus on photography?
I think back in the days, like it's like a decade ago by now. So I was doing a lot of like portrait photography back then. And I was slowly also going into just doing a little bit of like landscape-ish photography. And because Denmark, we don't have glaciers, we don't have waterfalls, we don't have mountains, we don't have all those things. And I was just like looking at all these gorgeous photos on back then 500 pixels from back then, the big photographers. And a lot of it came out of Iceland. Mm-hmm. And my sister had been living in Iceland for 3 years. I visited her a couple of times before I became a photographer. So I knew that Iceland was kind of doable. Like it's quite easy to get around up there. So inspired by a lot of those photos, I just decided to borrow my parents' car, and there's a ferry that goes from Denmark over the Faroe Islands to Iceland. So 3 weeks in Iceland just to myself, just doing photography. And that was when I kind of figured out that, okay, I want to be a landscape photographer. It was the first time I saw the Northern Lights. I got epic sunsets over waterfalls, photographed these massive waterfalls, and I was just sold. This is what I want to do. So the inspiration came simply just by, I won't say like, consuming content, but watching photos and videos about Iceland and landscape photography on the social media back then.
And when was that? What year are we talking about here?
2013, 14, and I went in late 2015.
Okay. So it's actually, it's I want to say not that long ago, but it's actually a decade now.
It is a decade ago. I was 30.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Are you 40 now, man?
Yeah, I'm turning 40 next year.
No way. Okay. We're the same age because I'm 39.
Yeah. 39 here.
Okay. Right on. Yeah. okay, I guess let's go even further back though, because I know you had a history in gymnastics, and I think that's how you got into videography from the beginning, right? Like,
Yeah,
tell me a little bit about like
almost.
how your journey into photography even started.
Yes. So if we go all the way back to the beginning, I was really into movies back in late 90s, start to zeros, with the Lord of the Rings coming out. And we had that period where there was made a lot of what we define as sword and sandal movies. So the Gladiator, Troy, Lord of the Rings, Kingdom of Heaven, all that stuff coming out back then. And there was like a period where all the movie trailers for those movies had this epic choir music in it. And that kind of music was not available on the internet. So I found a forum where people who worked in the industry kind of like leaked that production music so we could listen to it there. And in that forum, we decided to make fan trailers. And through that video production or video fan making, that was where I learned editing videos. And from there, because I was a gymnast, I could like use the skills for video editing to make gymnastic samplers and film also in slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, the slow motion cameras were just like really, really bad quality. But when the Canon 550D came out, we had access to 50 or 60 frames per second
Yeah,
instead of 20 pixels.
The T3i Rebel in North America,
Yeah.
the same camera. I remember that.
Yeah,
And that makes a big difference in gymnastics, obviously.
Exactly. So when I had that, and at the same time I then had access to a DSLR, then I could also like when I looked into what a raw photo was, and I found out that was how the professionals did it. I was like, oh, and from there, rest is history.
Yeah, so editing was a big part of it then.
Yeah,
so with these movie trailers, would you actually download the trailer that was online and then recut it?
No, I totally ripped the original files through MIRC, where you could kind of like download the 5.1 channels, and then you could run it through a program where you could isolate the center channel, where all the vocals and the text and the sound effects were on. So you could remove the music, and then you had the entire movie with just sound effects and the vocals. And then you could chop it up and make your own trailers.
Man, that sounds like a lot of editing.
Oh, the workarounds you had to do back then, and you were able to do back then, was crazy.
That's impressive.
It was funny.
All right, so you get that camera, the 550D, old Canon crop sensor, but a digital camera. Did you own that, or was that part of the gymnastics like training center?
So first, my dad got one, and then I got one myself later. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it was like a camera within the family.
My first reel, my first DSLR was the 550D. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. That's strange. Mine was the T3i Rebel, which I'm pretty certain was the same one. Just
I think that was the 600D, but it was only a generation apart.
Yeah,
it was the T2i in American.
Like 2011, 2010.
Ish.
I think I got it.
Yeah. And I think the one I got was released maybe in 8 or 9 or something.
Yeah, like I had a 10 to 20 lens, the wide angle, and I had a Tamron like 18 to 250, which I loved. That was like stayed on my camera all the time.
Yeah, anyway, I had the for wide angle. It was the Tokina 11 to 16 millimeter.
Nice. Yeah. Super warped.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about travel photography. Tell me, how would you define travel photography?
Whenever we define these things, boom, yeah. How would I define landscape photography?
No, not landscape photography.
No, but it's so hard because it's such a broad one, right? Because I guess travel photography is like the top genre. As photography, then there's travel photography, and then you can define it again, subgenre for travel landscape photography, travel street photography, travel, I don't know, portrait photography.
Wildlife, for sure.
Wildlife, yeah. So I guess it's, even though I kind of see travel photography more like it's probably like those old National Geographic stuff where you travel and then you take photos of faraway places that includes humans. I think that's how I think about travel photography. So if you go to Egypt to photograph the pyramids, you would have some, it's completely stereotypical, some Bedouins and some camels in front of the pyramids. If you go to Tibet, you don't just photograph the buildings, you try and find some monks in front of those buildings or something like that. Yeah. So they always have to have that human element, I guess. That's how I think about it, but obviously it doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think of places like Morocco, so your Egypt example is a good one. Afghanistan in the 70s, these places that are far-flung, Mongolia, where we're going next actually with travel photography. But this idea of trying to incorporate like local culture and local people without making it like too portrait based, like more of like people within the landscape or wildlife.
Probably, a bit where landscape photography can be a little bit, I won't say sterilized, but it could be very graphical. I think that's the way I would like to think about it. Whereas you put that street and documentary part into travel photography in that genre, where it's a little bit more like shoot from the hip. Like, I think it's more documentary, probably. Whereas landscape photography can truly be that. But I personally approach landscape photography from a more graphical point of view. I think a lot about the composition that I want and the light and all that stuff.
I mean, I know you teach a lot about composition. It's a big part of your brand and your style. And I love that. I think that's fantastic as a landscape photographer myself, travel photography, wildlife photography. It's all really powerful if you have a very good balanced composition. That's what it's all about. Even with adding human elements, your friend James Popsies is a good example of that. I think there's one photographer I'm very inspired by named Jord Hammond, who lives there. He's based out of Bali. He's a British dude. He's actually a bit younger than us, I think. And I met him a number of years ago, and I've been following him since then. And his stuff is just amazing. So I'm going to try and get him on the podcast. But he does a really good job of balancing like people in their element. So like Vietnam, rice farmers, buffalo farmers in China, another thing that we're going to try and do with TRVL. And sometimes they're staged. And that's like a whole other talk that we can have. I'd like to actually talk with Jord about this to see if he does stage or if he doesn't, because I'm not exactly sure. I want to get his opinion. But I think like some of the stuff that I want to do in China with the cormorant fishermen, and probably the buffalo farmers will be somewhat staged. So that's a whole other composition topic of conversation. But let's talk about landscape photography then, because if landscape photography follows under travel and you've done a ton of landscape photography in Iceland, Faroe Islands, Tuscany, Antarctica, what would you say is some of the things that you're looking for in a landscape composition?
Well, I generally always try to balance my photos properly. But the main thing I always look for is like a subject. What is it I want to show in the photo? It can be big, it can be small. I can fill the frame, I can use negative space, all that stuff. But for me, it's always like having at least one subject. Optimally, I wouldn't mind having a couple of subjects and maybe some subjects that work together. Over the years, like to begin with, I did a lot of the wide angle vista photo. I still do that a lot. But I generally like to have that little person in there somewhere. So, because for me, when it comes to landscape photography, it's one of the best ways to show the size of the landscapes.
Scale.
And I think for me personally, that's just such a big part of nature, is just how tiny we humans are when we compare to nature. And I find that super fascinating. Even like our biggest constructions, our biggest buildings, bridges, and all that, how tiny those constructions are compared to how big Earth is.
Yeah, yeah, good point. I was thinking how tiny people are in compared to those
Yeah.
constructions, but when you
Yeah,
think
exactly.
about
Yeah.
the constructions in the size of the earth and then the
Yeah.
universe, oh my God.
Yeah.
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 Well, in
Exactly.
a
So
way, too, your little man is sort of like a human element
yeah.
and does invoke travel photography because it gives people the inspiration to go to those places. Because a lot of the times, you're hiking to a location, especially in the Faroe Islands, which
Yeah.
is hard to get to. It's remote, it's very weather dependent, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a part of travel, really, is like the planning, the weather, waiting to see what the atmosphere is doing and really focusing on that. So let's move on from there. I got a few questions from our audience. I asked people yesterday I told people I'd be interviewing you today and on the podcast and what questions they would have for you. So we got a couple here from people that you might know. I've got one from Deborah McPhail out of Scotland, and she asks, how would you define an epic landscape photo? So let's, you just told us what a landscape photo is, with balance and having a subject, maybe multiple subjects, adding a human element to show scale. So on top of that, then what makes it epic? Like, if you have a good photo, what makes it like what you've got printed behind you on the wall?
Yeah, I think an epic landscape is probably something where I would a grand vista.
It's all got to come together,
Yeah, it coming together, because I very, very rarely use the word epic about the Danish landscapes. It usually includes mountains or big valleys or like these grand vistas. And you can rarely get these grand vistas in Denmark because our landscapes are just so flat, relatively flat. We do have hills and we have the Sky Mountain. But for me, that is epic. It's including glaciers and mountains and the big stuff. I would say that's probably where I would draw the line with epic.
Yeah, it's a very powerful word in English.
It's the same as Tuscany. I would rarely talk about epic in Tuscany, although if
your last trip, you got pretty good conditions though, right? With the side light and the low clouds from the drone looked really good.
Exactly. That's where, like, maybe the sky, if that is included, where you have some big thunderclouds or something like that, then we can start talking about it being epic. Whereas I would probably, for the Danish landscapes, use more words like gorgeous and beautiful and lovely.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense, especially in the spring and summertime.
Yeah,
exactly. Very nice place to be here in Northern Europe.
Yeah.
All right. So let me take a different spin on travel photography and landscape mixed together, because I think that is a big part of what you and I do. And a lot of times we are sort of dictated by the weather. Yeah. So on your travel adventures, on your workshops, how do you manage unpredictable weather?
Well, it depends a little bit from workshop to workshop, because some of them we often change hotel in between, and then we get the weather that we get. And then it's a question about patience and waiting for an opening. Like, theoretically, it is of course possible that you just get super low clouds for like 3 or 4 days in Iceland. And then you just have to deal with that. So there's no reason to go and photograph mountains if you can't see them. Then you come up with something alternative. But else, like in the Faroe Islands, I usually stay at the same hotel and then I drive out. And depending on where the wind comes from, there's usually a part of the islands that is visible. And then you just go to where there's a chance of some opening and getting some light.
So you kind of plan the workshop around the weather when you're there on location. Yeah.
And the good idea is, of course, like, if you do get those low clouds, chances are it's also rainy, which means that there will be water in the waterfalls. Well, then you go to the coastline or you go to the waterfalls instead. So,
yeah, there's always something. I agree. I mean, I remember one day in Antarctica, we were socked in completely and we ended up trying to focus on abstracts. Yes. And then, a few months later, I got back and some of my favorite photos from that whole trip are abstract Antarctica.
Yeah, it's funny when you are out traveling, which one photos that becomes your favorites over time. And for me, it does change a little bit over the first 6 months, but from there I have kind of like, okay, these here are my favorites. and they may not have been when I took them on location.
Now, I think you've had a pretty big role in putting Iceland on the map and Iceland photography locations. And I think Tuscany kind of falls into this question as well. How do you stay inspired in places that are sort of over photographed, with over tourism, especially in the landscape photography world?
I know it's a sensitive subject for a lot of landscape photographers, that they go out to just be on their own and just photograph for themselves, and they don't go to those hotspots. It has honestly never bothered me that there's a lot of other people. If I don't want to have other people around, then I just don't go to the hotspots. There's so many other places that you can go to. Like it's. I remember when I started out, and if I went to, I don't know, Scotland or somewhere in Britain or Wales, like I wanted to go to the famous locations because that's what I generally travel to. Like I don't go to Britain to photograph forests. I have plenty of forests here in Denmark. So I actually want to go to those hotspots. And me thinking that I can go there without there being other people, I would say that's just borderline arrogant. Of course, other people will be there. Like, there's a reason why those places are famous.
Yeah.
So going there as a tourist, complaining about all the tourists, it just make no sense.
It's kind of funny, isn't it?
Yeah. Sometimes when I talk about it in my videos, I make this distinction between photographers and regular tourists, but it's not really fair to the other tourists because obviously I'm a tourist too. But yeah, so if there's just plenty of other places that you can go and photograph. Like you don't need specifically to go to the hotspots. Like I have, let's see here, I have this one here from Scotland. See how thick this book is, just with photography locations from Scotland. Like you don't need to specifically go to like the Old Man of Storr each time you go to Scotland. There are a lot of other places to photograph, right? So that's generally my approach to most of the places I travel to. It's the same with Tuscany. Like when people think Tuscany, they usually think Valdoccia, where all the famous locations are, because that's where we go with most of the tours. But Tuscany is a massive area. There's so many other places to go and photographs, and you don't have to be within the area of like it's basically a radius of maybe 5 kilometers around San Curico, where most photographers photograph. Like Tuscany is huge.
No, I agree. I mean, I used to work as a tour leader with G Adventures, and we would always go to the sort of the most popular locations because that's what people wanted to see.
Exactly.
Patagonia is another good example. But once you get to know that location so well, then you can build the book, with 100 other locations that are also very stunning, that once people get kind of those iconic spots, they can continue to explore a little bit more.
Yeah. One thing Sam and I do when we're in Tuscany is we of course go to the hotspots. That's where we generally try to be around the golden hour, because that's basically what people expect, because those are the photos that people see and they want to go. But we spend a whole lot of time what we just call running and gunning, where we drive on the small roads and then we stop here and we stop there for maybe 10, 15 minutes, take the photos relative to what the weather is, and then we decide where we stop relative to what the clouds are doing and what the light is doing and so forth. And it seems to me that people really enjoy the more spontaneous too, because they see how we can also work as landscape photographers. We don't have to set up a tripod and stand in the same location for 2-3 hours and wait for the light. We can also be spontaneous and just like go and drive along the roads and see what happens.
Yeah, and that's a part of travel experience too. Yeah. I mean, what are you there for? You have kind of your broader idea of trying to get a couple of like keepers, but then it's about experiencing the location, the culture, the people, the food, and trying to capture that in a unique way. So that's very important. Making time for that during a workshop, I think, is very important for sure.
It's the same way I work back home here in Denmark. Like I thoroughly enjoy just driving around on roads I've never been to, and suddenly there's just an awesome composition. And then I can decide whether I want to stay there for a little while or I just want to shoot it like once and move on. And other times I have a specific idea for what I want, and then I go to that place and dedicate myself to that place for several hours. So it's different strategies, and you get different results.
And through traveling, when you started your photography journey in Iceland, visiting your sister, and you got super inspired by the lights and the northern lights and all the waterfalls and whatnot, had that sort of triggered something in you to go further afield? Is that how you started to become more interested in the Faroe Islands, going to Italy, going to Svalbard, going to Antarctica? Like, what was the catalyst for continuing these adventures? And are you still inspired to keep going?
I'm super inspired to keep going. Like I live and breathe the landscape photography. The traveling aspect in itself can be a bit tiring when especially when we came out of the pandemic. We had a lot of like catching up to do. So there was a lot of traveling on the program. So I changing your mind all the time to new locations was a bit tiring. So for the past half year, I've taken a little bit more time off from the traveling, but it starts again now with the workshops. But what inspired me after Iceland was just like, okay, Iceland, super awesome. Where else can I also go? Lofoten, huge place. I want to go there. The Faroe Islands was also exploding back then, 16, 17. So I also wanted to go there. And for me as a Dane, it's relatively easy to get to the Faroe Islands, just 2 hours of flight from Copenhagen. So everybody speaks Danish up there, so it's very easy for me to get around. And yeah, just driving down through Europe, I also tried that. Like back then, I was just inspired by all the popular stuff, and that's part of, I guess, most landscape photographers. They go to these popular places, photograph popular stuff, like tulips in the Netherlands or lavenders in Provence in France, and from there, once you have done that, then you kind of like, okay, what's there besides that? Because obviously when you travel, you also see a lot of other stuff that inspires you. If at the very least you have trained your eye to see it, and then you kind of figure out that, okay, there's actually way more to it than just these hotspots. And that's also one of the things that made me realize just how awesome Denmark is for landscape photography, right, even though we don't have mountains or glaciers.
Yeah, I mean, you're inspiring me to spend more time in Denmark, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you're even from Germany. Like, it's a massive country. You must have
from Canada, but I live in Germany.
Yeah,
true that. I can explore a little bit more. I just have to get a car and more time. But okay, so I think you kind of touched on how travel can open your eyes to new cultures, new scenes. It definitely opens your mind. I hear that a lot from Americans when they travel for the first time. They're sort of like, oh wow, the world is way more complex and different than I've been taught. And I found that too, being Canadian. When I first sort of met other people from different parts of the world, I got interested, and then traveling for the first time, you're kind of like, wow, your perspectives broaden. So for you, with travel photography, landscape photography, landscape photography is your main niche, but you're traveling to these places to, photograph new landscapes. How has that changed your broader perspective on the world and your artistic style?
It's hard to say with my artistic style. I think over the years, it was a lot about like epic landscape photographs to begin with. And then I actually think my artistic style changed more as I started photographing in Denmark. So it became maybe a little bit softer, where it's still high contrast, but I think people can see that over the past decade, my photos have maybe become a little bit softer. I've broadened out when it comes to landscape photography. It's not always only the epic stuff. It can also be a little bit more calm landscapes and calmer editing. But me being from Denmark, we're such a small country, so I've kind of grown up with the fact that because we are so dependent on the countries around us, that I think it's just natural to me to think that there's other ways of living your life. And I think probably many Europeans are aware of that, because we don't have to drive for a whole lot of hours before we get to a completely other culture. Whereas if you're from the US, like if you drive from one state to the other, of course, there's probably some difference between a person from Washington State and a person from Alabama, but you're all Americans, right? Whereas I don't think necessarily that all people from we all think that we are Europeans, but it's not that big part of our identity as our national identity is. So even like between Denmark and Sweden, we can see that there's a big difference. Maybe an American can't see there's a big difference between Danes and Swedes, but we can surely see the difference between Danes and Germans, and between Germans and French people, and like between British and so forth. So I have kind of known always that there's a big difference between our mental states. So, but then what has probably surprised me the most is generally, I've been confirmed that there's a big difference, but then again, there's not really that big of a difference between humans, at the very least in the Western mindset. So yeah, you being from Canada and me being from Denmark, you live in Germany now. Like, what's the difference? Our language is different, but our mentality, like, more or less the same, I guess.
That's true. Yeah, I thought I would get along with you really well. And then we did meet in Denmark last year. That is definitely the case. There's still a few things that I'm learning, though. I didn't know we were the exact same age. So that's interesting. But no, I agree with you. I think that the way the world is changing now, especially with geopolitics, travel is becoming interesting. I mean, it's always been a question of sustainability. Even since I started working in travel, I studied adventure tourism in Canada in 2009. Just so you know, like I've worked in travel industry before I became a photographer. With G Adventures, a small groups travel company based out of Toronto. I was a tour leader in South America. It was always a big question of like sustainability. How are we going to give back to nature, because we're taking so much from it with flights, especially, you know, and pollution and over tourism. So I feel like in geopolitics now, you know, going to China or going to Cuba, two places that I'm going to, can trigger certain things in regard to me not being able to go to the US now. Like I have to apply for a 10-year tourist visa because I can't get a ETSA, I think it is called, or an ESTA.
Yeah, ESTA, yeah.
So given that current situation, I know you follow a lot of politics. Do you find it difficult to make like fluffy, flowery, you know, nice videos about springtime in Denmark when the rest of the world is falling apart?
Yeah,
probably could phrase that question better for the viewers. Sorry, but
no,
what do you think?
Yeah, I know our viewers are probably using our videos mainly as escapism. If the viewers are seeing all my videos, they know that I can make like joke comments about it. I made a video like 4 or 5 months ago when it just blew up with the American Greenland stuff going on, where I made like a joke that if you want to join on a workshop in Greenland, maybe it's your last chance before there's a McDonald's on every street corner. Like, you know, like put it in like that. But no, I generally try to separate geopolitics from my landscape photography videos. It sometimes it feels weird not to acknowledge that the world is going crazy, but then on the other hand, we also seems in the end to be fine. Like it seems most of what's going on in the world, it's proxy wars, right? It's like a little bit, not a little bit for those who are in it, but it's down there or it's over there and stuff like that. It seems the information wars there for sure, but the physical war seems to be limited, at least for now. But yeah, I'm very much into it and follow it a lot. But I definitely separate it. It's the same with my private life. I don't talk a whole lot about my private life in my videos.
I mean, neither. I noticed that you don't really have like a studio. You know, you don't do things from your house very often.
Yeah, it's my living room right here. It's because I live in a small apartment. Like I can't afford a big apartment in Copenhagen. It's too expensive.
That's another thing we have in common then. I do the thing, dude. Like I remember, Nelly, when the pandemic happened, we had a serious conversation about where we want to go with our lives. You know, we weren't married yet. We hadn't had our first child. And the things that we were talking about was, you know, having a family, getting more consistent income, still traveling, but maybe not so much nomadically, especially during the pandemic. Our funds were just going down and down and down. So a lot of it had to do with financial resources and sort of like, what are we going to do here? And one of the decisions that we came to was that we're going to stop sharing, our day-to-day life on YouTube. And that was partly her decision and mine supporting her, being like, yeah, you know what, it's not really what I want either, because what do we have here? It's the same. It's a living room. I want to take people outside. I don't want to take them necessarily just here into look at my shitty little apartment in Hamburg that I pay too much for. But the geopolitics stuff I find very interesting, especially starting to run trips in China, which I'm personally very interested in. I've been to China once. I've been to Tibet, which I guess technically is China, but that's like another topic. And then putting that on YouTube makes it a little bit controversial, because I don't know if the government is watching that shit. What do I have to watch what I'm saying? Am I going to be banned from entering China? Am I going to, if I try to go to the US and try to get a visa, will I actually get it? Because I've been in Cuba twice, I'm making this video. Who knows? It's really interesting stuff, but it can't go unsaid in a way. So I think we have to find this strange balance, especially in my case with travel photography being what I'm really trying to focus in on. Landscape falls under that, but a lot of the cultural aspects, geopolitical, history, future is all very important stuff. So
yeah, it's so hard, because some of the photos and some of the landscapes I've seen from China are just mind blowing.
Oh, it's going to be awesome.
I would love to go there and photograph.
It's going to be awesome.
Photos I've seen from the Ural Mountains in Russia. Oh my God, I would love to go there. I would love to return to the US, but that's just, I'm not asked to bother with all that stuff, especially because I've become so used to also looking at the Scandinavian and the European landscapes, and there's still so much to photograph and so much I want to photograph here. So I don't feel that I don't feel that urge that I have to go to places. I was just in Japan for the first time here in spring, and
you went with Sophie, right?
Yeah, it was amazing. But I think Japan has been the only East Asian country that I've really wanted to go to for a long time.
Mongolia.
Sorry, one more time.
I think you were like Mongolia, but I guess that's more Central Asia.
Yeah. But generally, when it comes to those far away countries where there's a lot of consequences, can be a lot of consequences with traveling, I just don't bother with it. When I travel, I want to feel safe. I don't want to make it as much as of an adventure in that regard. There's places in the Middle East I've seen photos from that look absurdly awesome. But I just know that, at least for me and my own mentality, it's out of reach, and it's just how it is. I would like to go to the moon, but it's kind of also out of reach, right?
No, I think that's where you and I do differ a little bit. Yeah. And of course that's totally everybody's own personality there. Yeah. But I think for me, going to Cuba, there is a bit of a risk there, and it's definitely really challenging, and they're going through very hard times. But I am very much inspired and want to do stuff like that. Going to Tajikistan next year, I'll be right on the border with Afghanistan. It's not dangerous at all, but theoretically, there could be inherent danger. But we try and obviously, like anything, make it as safe as possible. So there's no point in putting myself, especially with 2 young children, one that's going to be born in the next couple of days, in any kind of risk. I don't want to do that. So, but then again, my perception of risk is different, though.
Yeah, but it's also important to remember that because we get all these news where it just looks as if the world is burning down, there's so many places where there is peace. Most places,
more than Iraq, dude. Yeah, there's peace. Yeah,
not. It shouldn't theoretically be a big problem going to most places.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of my old colleagues, tour leader with G Adventures, she's been traveling solo female in Eritrea and Djibouti and Somalia and Ethiopia and like all these kind of random African nations posting just amazing stories and photos saying like the people have been super welcoming. I'm sure she's sharing all the positive stuff because that's social media, but it's very inspiring to see. Like I love seeing that. And I'm certain that that Brendan and I will run a fantastic back-to-back workshop in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan next year. It's going to be fucking awesome.
Those places look amazing.
Yeah, and it's going to work. I'm certain of it. But am I going to run a tour to Afghanistan? No, obviously not. And it's not going to pay. I mean, it's not going to pay. It's not going to sell. I wouldn't even go there anyway. But Pakistan, I'd be willing to go to Pakistan.
Oh, some of the photos I've seen from, I guess it's generally northern Pakistan up towards the Himalayas.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks amazing. Crazy,
right? Exactly. Anyway, okay, let's change the subject. It's getting a bit too long. I got a number of fun questions from fan favorites of yours.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's go through them. I got one that says, ask him to say, Rod Grod Med Flod. Am I saying that wrong? Probably.
Yeah, you are.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's rød grød med fløde.
Wow, I was really wrong. Okay, what does it mean?
It's like a red porridge with cream. It's basically strawberry porridge with just cream or milk on. And it's something that Danes always challenge foreigners to say because
like that
it's hard to say that R sound and the Ø, which is a very Danish letter.
Can you say it again?
Rød grød med fløde.
Rød grød med fløde.
Rød grød med fløde.
Yeah. All right. Is it a dessert or a breakfast? What is it?
I think generally we use it as a dessert.
Nice. Okay, I got another one. Why didn't you buy Albert Dross's beautiful book yet?
Oh, that's so personal. It's even like I made a story about it and made a reel and the first thing was
not my Albert.
The first comment was like, "Oh, I don't see Albert Dross's book there." I'm like, I don't have infinite amount of money. I would like to have it at some point. I remember when it came out, I was just like, "Oh, it's so expensive," and then I haven't looked it up since. So yeah, well, I'll get it at some point.
Can I ask you about our podcast jungle from Paul Cunningham? Do you know?
Sorry, one more time.
Podcast guy. What about a podcast jungle from Paul Cunningham?
A podcast jungle.
Yeah, I have no idea. Ask him about our podcast jungle.
I think I made a podcast with him at some point.
Yeah, Cunningham is the woodland photographer from the UK. Nice guy.
Yeah.
He's a good dude. Annalise Page, please be sure to ask him his favorite weird Dutch saying.
Dutch saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know Dutch.
Maybe she was thinking about the Danish one, actually. She might just think that you're Dutch. I wonder.
Oof.
I feel like Annalise would probably know that you're Danish, though.
Yeah.
This is that's Nick Page's wife, by the way, for those who are listening.
Probably Danish then.
Yeah. Okay, what is your favorite place for landscape photography?
Denmark. Easy.
Oh, nice one. Okay, what is a non-photographic book or film that has influenced your photography?
Probably Lord of the Rings.
Nice. That's a good one. Will you ever photograph Southeast Asia? Like Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Malaysia?
Well, we just talked about it.
Well, you said Japan, and then you're not really inspired to go anywhere else. So.
Yeah. I've seen some of Daniel Kodan's stuff from
Indo.
Yeah, looks really, really nice.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's not something that draws me, and maybe at some point, I don't know.
He's like you and I with the drones too, though. Like we absolutely love flying drones.
Yeah.
And I think the drone perspective from places like Indo is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Anywhere you can get above the sea, you get some waterfalls, some volcanoes. Kamchatka in Russia. That would be fucking crazy to see that place.
That looks amazing.
Got one from Thomas Heaton. It says, how is he so good at rotating out of a water slide? No idea what that's about.
When we were in Lanzarote, we had fun in the pool, and there was this ridiculous water slide that we tried. It's obviously designed for kids, but I don't know that I don't think that one has gone through any safety tests, because as soon as you come down, you get like swung out of it in the most crazy way. And we just started like playing around, and it's because I've been a gymnast, so I just knew how to like twist my body. So that's why. Man, that was so funny.
It's the gymnast of
Yeah.
Mads Peter Iversen 25 years ago.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. All right, Mads. Well, let's wrap it up. That's been a very fun conversation, spanning a whole bunch of different topics. That's one of the things that I personally love about travel photography. So thanks for being a guest. I appreciate it. And until next time, or when you come down through Hamburg with Sophie, if you do have a day or two, I'd love to show you some buildings.
Awesome.
I can show you a few hidden locations here that you might really like, especially architecture stuff. So
Yeah,
that would be a fun little collaboration. So those watching, if you made it to the end here, thank you so much for listening, watching, and let us know in the comments if you have any other questions for Mads or what you thought of the episode. And any final words or thoughts, Mads, for this Travel Photography Podcast episode?
Nope.
Okay, easy. Nope. Perfect. All right, man. You have a good day, and thanks everybody for watching.